A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Survival of No Limits. I'm pretty much excited about the many things that I will be able to get to talk about here because, well, let's just say this one in particular certainly is going to have a lot of backstory behind it and also a lot of new material for me to talk about here on the channel itself. This one in particular, episode number 41. Filmmaking. Yeah. Though that kind of reminds me, it's been a little while since I pretty much went ahead and asked this now well-known question that happens to pretty much occupy the majority of Survival of No Limits related content itself. What on earth does this have to do with survival? And in this case, filmmaking is at the core of the question itself, and the answer that I have yet to put together. Well, simply put, I really gotta say that filmmaking itself is quite a huge part of my job itself, of my career, of my future, and it really is something out of hundreds of things out there that I could possibly do for Kaiju Force Neo as a whole in the past 16 years. Filmmaking certainly has held up the central core of the whole entire ordeal that the business itself has. And although there have been a lot of other parts that have occupied Kaiju Force Neo itself, filmmaking certainly has taken up a large percentage of the entire population of Kaiju Force Neo's related workforce. And I certainly say this because of the fact that filmmaking has been a huge thing that I've been doing in my life. And the thing is that this is now year number 16 that Kaiju Force Neo itself has been around, and also a time where I end up putting my own filmmaking skills out there. The thing is that at a very, very young age, I myself have really gotten into photography and filmography and cinematography as a whole. The thing is, by today's standards, more than 20 years later, I still do, in fact, have the same sort of impression and everlasting passion for something of the sorts. And the thing is, do I ever have to stop doing what I love? No, I shouldn't. But I will say that in the 16 years that I have really been putting stuff together for the channel, for everything that I've already done here, the channel itself may not be 16 years old. It's only around 13 at most. But the thing is that with Kaiju Force Neo being 3 years older, there really is a lot of backbone that has surrounded the many events that have taken place. In 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, and onwards, up until here in the present time, in 2021, I will say for sure that there have in fact been up to 11 projects that I've made in the 16 years that Kaiju Force Neo itself and its filmmaking part of the business has been around for. 16 years, 11 projects. I really will admit that there has been a lot of new material that I certainly have put together that allows me to talk a lot about what the future of the filmmaking portion of Kaiju Force Neo is. But the thing is, I don't always have the time to put some things together. And that's mostly the reason because either something ends up happening, whether it be an injury or a cancellation or a new idea that's been pitched in, which thereby just pushes some of the others to the side, or otherwise. Filmmaking itself has been an enormous ordeal. It's cost a lot of my time, my money, and a lot of people's patience, for the most part. The studio itself, Kaiju Force Neo, is probably no less than, well, the size of a large house. That pretty much is about that. So, other than how all those things are, I really will admit that with all 11 projects that I've put together, with only 7 pretty much being officially out. From the 2006 film about crystal mining up until 2017's The Day in One's Life, up until the Nerf Secret Revealed adaptation called Bolts of Intrigue, which I had just released this past January, up until my latest project ever, which was also released here in 21, In Hospitality. This was also something that I had pretty much spent a lot of time putting together, and also given to the fact that this was another project that I had to put on hold, and also delay, and then eventually cancel. But eventually I ended up bringing it back, and then here we are. Late March 2021. In Hospitality is out and waiting for your viewership, pretty much. But the thing is that aside from the majority of things that I happen to be putting together within filmography as a whole, I will say that the usage of filmmaking as a part of my time, as a hobby, as a job, as a career in my lifetime, it really has been quite a ride. With 7 projects that I currently have out there for people to see, well, technically only 3 at this point, but that's mostly because you could blame it all on the blackout period. You could pretty much blame it on a lot of things here and there, but I will admit, lots of things have happened. But Bolts of Intrigue and In Hospitality are pretty much out there in the public eye right now, with pretty much all the others just erased. All the originals are non-existent anymore. So that was just a sad, sad, sad ending to pretty much some things that really would have been life-changing, but that's just one thing out of a lot of things that you might have with filmmaking. Survival-related tips on filmmaking would probably include how can you gauge certain properties. Most of the time whenever I go out on certain properties to do my filmmaking work, whether if it's a piece that's owned by the government or if it's a piece that's actually owned by somebody, a giant section of land or a farm, basin, or some other portion of land itself that actually is owned by somebody, typically I have gone out to certain parts of the state of Wisconsin to get some permission or clarification to get out there and eventually start doing my work. And typically, I happen to pre-arrange a budget of how some things are going to be. And the budget, of course, will include a lot of items that I had already paid for and a lot of items that other people would have paid for. And then, of course, there would eventually be the deductions or additions that would eventually get added onto it because of various problems that could happen out there. Such as if I use somebody's car, for example. I end up renting it for maybe $635, even though I may not be 25. This is in fact something that I happen to do at a most legal way as possible. Of course, this just means that I'm typically borrowing people's cars out there. Sometimes paying a fee to use them for some time and pretty much getting the deposit back depending on what some things might be intact. Of course, I would put out a prepayment of some sort in case any sort of damage is caused, including scuff marks, tears, windows get smashed. Many other problems could arise at some point whenever a vehicle might end up getting damaged. But that's kind of been the way about it since day one. Another big thing about Kaiju Force Neo are the tropes and trademarks that I happen to put in. Typically speaking, every film that I've ever made since 2005, pretty much, it starts with a copyrighted song being put at the very start of the film itself. The title card and various montages of various things out there that happen during our lifetimes, pretty much. That's just one major traditional value that I happen to put on there as a trademark to all Kaiju Force Neo related material. And then of course there are the credits. The credits, of course, are typically 1 to 2 songs worth in length, with end credit scenes. And then, of course, there is the usage of a first-person perspective, which is something else that I happen to put in. Usually it's most of the time, usually it's not very often, usually it doesn't even happen at all. But that is a very rare outcome. And there might only be just one teeny tiny little moment where I might end up having to use a first-person view while filming the productions. But in all 7 currently existing projects that have been released, such as Blue Mare, The Day in One's Life, Triassica, and many others out there. And then of course there is Bolts of Intrigue and Inhospitality, which were both released here in 2021 because of how much delays and cancellations and postponements I've had to put together. So overall, that's just another big reason out there that I happen to try to put as much work as I can. But the next biggest project that I have here is called the S Grade. And sure, I will have first-person viewpoints on there, and sure, I will have copyrighted songs being put in throughout these films. But the thing is, paying royalties, paying up a lot, it adds up to the budget pretty quickly. But I will admit, I've had my moments where I have been put in a lot of danger, such as points where I've done most of the filming, but I've kind of risked some of my camera people's lives by having them stay very close to the side of a cliff or the side of an unprotected barrier that could lead to them falling to their doom. And there have been parts where they've had to pretty much stand near some pretty toxic plants or animal nests or hives, pretty much. And those are just some of the dangerous things out there that I happen to put some of my crew members in, but not even close to pretty much talking about everything else. But you know what? I kind of have to know my limitations here on what I can pretty much talk about before YouTube ends up putting an age restriction on here or something different. I certainly would not want to get flagged for community guidelines requirement violations, so that's probably where I'm going to have to draw the line. Because a lot of stuff about filmmaking is certainly dangerous, but in the end, lots of the people that I've had around me who have come to work on my projects and assist in any production possible whenever the time is necessary, most of the time they have a good experience or a great experience. And I make it as rewarding as possible, usually with a little something at the very end of everything that's already been done. So that's pretty much just what that's like, and more importantly, that's probably going to be it for right now, because 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48 are going to be situated somewhere else. Maybe outside. Maybe something else. I guess I don't know for sure, but if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.